Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to take a really quick look at this Seiko 5 here. And this watch here, of course, is on loan from our boutique, and the reference number for this watch is SNXF05K. And this model is an older model, so you can see that it sports that older shield logo or Superman logo, and it is powered by the 7S movement, so more or less an ancient model over here. But for me and many watch fans out there, I think this one falls under the cheap and desirable category, right? So it's not quite the cheap and nasty Seiko 5s. We're gonna, take a really quick look at some of the cool features here of this watch. So over here we've got a really small 37mm case size here, and overall thickness for the watch is 11.6 millimeters. It's got a 19mm lug width. Alright, so strap changes out there may not be very happy to hear this. And finally, it's got a L to L of 47.2 millimeters. Again, very wearable dimensions over here. Case size is just about the classic size of around 36 millimeters, and even the thickness, not too bad. I think at 11.6 is not too bad, still very manageable. The crown size here though can be quite a pain if you want to operate it, because there is almost no grip here. Okay, so there's no grip. You need to use your fingernail to sort of pull out the crown. Alright, it's a non-screw-in crown, but I think it's not a really good experience, alright, in terms of crown operation and time setting and all that. So with the lens zoom in a little bit, let's take a closer look at this Seiko 5 here with the grid dial. Okay, I'm going to call this one the grid dial because all these lines and all that just reminds me of my old mathematics class, where you draw your graphs and all that stuff. And let's quickly talk about the case design over here. So it really resembles one of those cushion case kind of thing. Not quite the GS44 design, but you do see elements of cushion case over here. They don't have a true blue lug design over here, so to speak. So, well, the lug is sort of part of the case as well. So I think I can safely call this one the cushion case. Alright, and again, this one here gives us a very vintage feel to the watch. And the case of the watch here is fully polished. Okay, every surface on the watch case is polished, no brush surfaces, but they've included, or they've paired it up with a fully brushed bracelet. Okay, I find this very weird. Okay, it's a bit unusual. Alright, at the same time, it does feel weird to me because the bracelet now feels like an afterthought. Alright, this is fully brushed, but the case, everything here is fully polished. So not too much to complain when it comes to the finishing and all that, right? It is what it is. It's a Seiko 5 entry-level workhorse kind of watch. And now let's move on and talk about this dial here. Alright, so as mentioned earlier in the video, I said that this Seiko falls under the category of cheap but desirable, alright, or cheap and desirable, right? Not cheap and nasty. Alright, so it does have some cool factors, and of course I'm going to bring this closer to the lens. You can see how cool this dial is. Alright, so it reminds me of mathematics class, but my wife told me this one feels like kitchen, alright, the old school kitchen wall tiles. Just take a look here, the grid dial here. So some watch fans out there may like such a design, very interesting, very quirky look to it, and for me I think it sort of spices things up a bit and not your usual boring white paper white dial. And here's a quick size comparison between these two Seikos. Alright, so the one on my right here is my own Seiko, and I love this one. Alright, it is probably one of my best purchases back in 2021 though. So over here, pretty similar dimensions, 37 versus 37, but in terms of thickness, you will see that the Seiko 5 is way thicker. Okay, so I guess it is due to the automatic movement, so they've got a rotor and all that. So just take a look at the difference in terms of thickness. Okay, so over here the quartz wins hands down due to the lack of a protruding case back, and overall I think both watches, they just wear very well even if you have smaller wrists. And here's a quick look at the lume shot of this watch here. Alright, the little Seiko 5 here does have lume on its hands as well as the tip of the hour marker, so sort of resembles a matchstick marker design. I quite like this kind of design, and I must say the lume brightness here is pretty decent. So now I'm just quickly going to sum up the pros and cons of this watch here. For the pros, I do like the fact that this one here has got a really cool case design. Okay, so not quite the generic type of case design where the lugs are lugs, the bezel is the bezel, that kind of thing. Over here is more or less a cushion case, and I think this is probably one of the standout design feature over here. And next thing I like about this watch is the dial. All right, the dial here. Again, let me just bring it closer to the lens here. The dial here is really interesting to look at. All right, so something that you will see only when you go close up. And lastly, this watch is a great size. Okay, let me just do a fake wrist shot over here. I'm sorry for tipping over the camera. So just have a look at the wrist size here. All right, a fake wrist shot here. All right, so almost no lug overhang despite the fact that it is a cushion case, minimal curve on the mid case over here, but really very wearable. Okay, good size for all wrist sizes. But of course there will be negatives. This is a Seiko 5 after all, and at this price point Seiko is not going to give you everything. Okay, so the first dislike that I have about this watch would be the bracelet. All right, it is just awful. All right, this bracelet here feels cheap, it's jangly, noisy, poor quality. The links are like stamped or folded, and it doesn't even use pins. All right, so you use some kind of a locking plate mechanism for you to resize your bracelet, and the clasp here is more or less a joke. Okay, so it is no flip lock, no pushers, it's just a pull and friction kind of a clasp over here. So I'm really not a big fan of this overall bracelet and clasp design. And we've also got a crown here that is really a pain to work with. Okay, so every time when I need to set time on this watch, to make it nice at 10 minutes past 10, I think it's really a torture for my fingernails. Okay, so it's really a pain to work with this small little recessed crown here. Okay, so they really had to step up on this nonsense mechanism here. And lastly, I do feel that this case back here is way too tall. Alright, so in other words, it protrudes just way too much. Alright, just have a look here. It is almost as thick as the mid case, definitely thicker than the bezel. Alright, so let me just bring this closer. Okay, so pardon all the reflections over here. Okay, so you can see that the case back really juts out too much, and I do feel that this sort of takes away some of the wearing experience, because when you wear the watch on your wrist, it tends to sit just a little bit too tall. Okay, so the gap here is not exactly caused by a lug overhang. You can see very clearly over here, it is caused by the tall case back. Okay, so otherwise the watch is going to sit much lower, thereby making it more aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so minor complaints from me. Alright, so do bear in mind that this watch is not very expensive, so around 150, 140 Singapore dollars, you shouldn't expect too much. So there you have it. That was my really quick show and tell of this small little Seiko 5 with the grid dial. Reference number is SNXF05K. Alright, I'm gonna enjoy reading all these long and crazy reference numbers. I'll see you next week. This is the Watch Kaki, and this is George signing off here. Bye bye.